The Sands Hotel was packed on the night of November 3, 1955. Not the easy kind of packed, the alert kind. The kind where people weren't just watching the stage, they were watching each other. Dean Martin was 3 songs into his set, relaxed, confident, completely at home. His voice filled the room effortlessly, and the audience was exactly where he wanted them, laughing, leaning forward, settled in. Then the doors opened. Anthony Big Tony Castiano walked in late. He didn't hurry. He didn't scan for a seat. He paused just long enough for the room to register him, not because he was famous, but because of what he represented. In Las Vegas, certain people didn't need introductions. Their presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Heads turned. Conversations dipped. A few people glanced toward the stage, not to Dean, but to see if Dean had noticed. He had. Dean kept singing. That decision mattered more than it seemed. Big Tony ordered a drink, loudly. He laughed loudly. He made sure the people around him knew he was there. This wasn't about enjoying the show. It was about being acknowledged by it. The song continued. Then Big Tony's voice cut through the room. "Hey, Dean," he called out, amused with himself, "sing something with some life. My grandmother's got more energy, and she's been dead 10 years. The laughter didn't come all at once. Some people laughed out of habit. Some laughed because they felt uncomfortable. Some didn't laugh at all. The room waited. Dean paused just long enough for the silence to register, not long enough to lose control, just long enough to let everyone know he'd heard it. Then he smiled, not tense, not defensive, calm. "Well, sir," Dean said evenly, "if she sings like you behave, I'd love to hear her." The laughter came back, stronger this time. Relief laughter, the kind that releases pressure. Dean had handled it perfectly. He hadn't ignored the comment. He hadn't escalated it. He'd acknowledged it, redirected it, and moved on. The band followed him immediately, and the show continued as if nothing had happened. For a moment the room relaxed, but not everyone did. Big Tony leaned back in his chair, quiet now, smiling to himself, watching. Because for people used to controlling rooms, being laughed with instead of at isn't always the end of the story. Sometimes it's just information, a way of measuring how far they can push next. Dean continued his set, but something had changed, not in his voice, not in his posture, in the attention of the room. People weren't just listening anymore, they were waiting, because everyone there understood one thing: that joke hadn't been the real move. It had been the test, and the real moment was still coming. About 20 minutes later, the tone of the room changed. Dean Martin eased out of the jokes and banter and into something slower, warmer. He began telling a story, not a punchline, not a setup, a memory. He talked about growing up in Steubenville, Ohio, about small houses, long days, and learning how to carry yourself in the world. The audience leaned in without realizing it. This was the side of Dean they didn't always see. Then he mentioned his mother. Her name was Angela. Dean spoke about how she raised him, about manners, about respect, about how she believed the way you treated people mattered more than how much money you had. It was gentle, personal, the kind of story that makes a crowded room feel smaller. People smiled. Some nodded along, and then a chair scraped the floor. Big Tony stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't rush his words. That made it worse. "Dean," he said, his voice carrying easily, "your mother taught you manners. Shame she didn't teach you how Vegas really works." The room went quiet instantly, not confused quiet, understanding quiet. This wasn't a joke anymore. It wasn't playful. It wasn't even clever. It was personal, and it was public. Everyone in that showroom knew it. In Italian families, in most families, there were lines you didn't cross. Mothers were one of them, especially when they were gone, especially when their memory was sacred. The band stopped playing. Dean didn't react right away. He didn't step back. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply stood there, hands resting naturally, eyes forward. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Once something like that is said in a room like this, it can't be undone. There's no rewinding it, no pretending it didn't happen. Whatever came next would define the moment, and possibly more than just the moment. Dean took a slow breath. Then he leaned slightly toward the microphone. "Sir," he said, calm and measured, "thank you for bringing up my mother." A few people shifted in their seats, because she's actually the perfect example of what I'm trying to explain. Big Tony smiled, not wide, not friendly, confident, as if he believed this was still going his way. Dean continued. My mother came to this country from Italy when she was 17 years old, he said. She didn't speak English, she had no money, she had nothing except her character. The room stayed silent. People weren't just listening anymore. They were trying to understand what Dean was doing. Was this a deflection, a story, or something else entirely? Everyone sensed the same thing. This response wasn't improvised. It was deliberate, and whatever Dean was building toward, there was no turning back now. Dean paused, letting the words settle over the room. My mother cleaned houses for rich people. He said, she scrubbed their floors, washed their clothes, cooked their meals. And some of those people treated her with respect. They said please and thank you. They saw her as human. Big Tony's smile started to fade. Dean's voice remained calm, almost gentle, but it carried a steel no one could ignore. The room leaned in collectively. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a quiet confrontation. But some of them, Dean continued, treated her like she was invisible, like she was nothing, and being poor or working with your hands didn't make her any less deserving of dignity. The silence was complete. The audience wasn't breathing loudly. They were holding on every word. They understood the tension. Everyone knew that one wrong move could turn this from a story into disaster. Yet Dean didn't rush. He let the weight of his words do the work. And you know what my mother told me? Dean asked, his voice low, intimate. She said, Dino, the people who are cruel when they have power are the weakest in the world. They need power to feel strong. They need to make others feel small so they can feel big. Big Tony's posture shifted slightly. He leaned forward without realizing it, as if listening harder might make Dean stop. But Dean didn't. His eyes stayed locked on Big Tony, unwavering, steady. Real strength, Dean said, almost whispering now, is being kind when you could be cruel. Real power is lifting people up, not tearing them down. A few people in the audience gasped softly. Some nodded. Others held their mouths in disbelief. A mobster was being taught a lesson by a singer, and everyone in the room felt it. So when you make a joke about my mother, Dean said, calm, measured, you're not showing strength. You're showing exactly what she taught me. You're showing weakness. You're proving you need to insult someone to feel powerful. Big Tony's face was red now. His crew had stopped laughing. People around the tables exchanged glances. This was more than confrontation. This was a public mirror held up to a man who rarely saw himself clearly. Dean stepped closer to the microphone. Now you said my mother should have taught me how Vegas really works. Let me tell you, Vegas runs on money. Sure, on power, absolutely. But what really makes it function? The dealers, the waitresses, the janitors, the performers, people who show up every day doing their jobs with dignity even when others treat them like they're nothing. He paused, letting that land. Big Tony's smirk was almost gone. A flicker of unease passed across his face. My mother understood something you clearly do not, Dean said. Power without character is just bullying. Money without decency is just greed. Making jokes about someone's mother doesn't make you clever, funny, or powerful. It makes you small. The audience was captivated, not by a show, not by entertainment, by truth, by the unshakable calm of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Big Tony had walked in to dominate a room. Dean Martin had just shown the room, and Big Tony, something entirely different. And Dean wasn't finished yet. Dean took a slow breath, letting the room absorb the tension he had created. His eyes never left Big Tony. His voice remained calm, almost soft, but every word carried weight. So here's what I'm going to do, Dean said evenly. I'm going to continue my show. I'm going to honor my mother's memory by treating everyone in this room with respect and dignity, even when they don't deserve it, even when they disrespect her. Because that is real strength. That is real class. The audience held its breath. Some shifted in their seats. Some whispered to themselves. No one dared interrupt. No one dared laugh. They all understood this was not just a response. It was a lesson. Dean turned slightly toward the band. Let's pick it up. Something cheerful. How about That's Amore? The music started, light and playful, filling the room again. But the atmosphere had changed. The laughter wasn't the same. The clapping wasn't the same. The room wasn't the same. Everyone knew Big Tony had just been shown something he didn't expect. And it had happened without a shout, without a threat, without a single raised hand. Big Tony sat in silence. His crew glanced at each other, uneasy. The confidence and dominance that had been their armor now felt brittle. The mobster had come in to assert his power. And yet, here he sat, quietly, watching a man continue his performance, unfazed, unshaken, entirely in control. Dean's calm was its own kind of authority. Every word he had spoken had peeled away the illusion of intimidation Big Tony carried. The room could feel it. The people closest to Tony, the ones who had laughed at his jokes, now looked at him differently. Respect shifted quietly, imperceptibly toward Dean. Dean's eyes met Big Tony's again. No anger, no fear, just clarity. And in that clarity was the strength of a man who understood something Tony had forgotten. The real measure of power was how you treated others when no one was forcing you to be kind. Dean's words hung in the air. Every person in the showroom felt them. The show continued, but the balance had changed. Big Tony's laughter was gone. His smirk faltered. Even his posture shifted. The audience, sensing the subtle shift, became part of it. They were witnessing something rare, calm truth overpowering threat. And then, as the last notes of the song faded, Dean smiled lightly, just enough to let the room exhale, to let the tension break, but not fully. There was still the understanding that tonight had been different. That power had been shown in a way nobody expected, that the lesson had been delivered, quietly but undeniably. In those moments Dean Martin didn't just entertain. He instructed, he led, and he commanded respect without ever raising his voice. Big Tony had come into the room expecting to dominate, to intimidate, to leave an impression. Instead, he had been exposed, not by force but by calm, measured truth. And everyone in the room knew it. It was the kind of moment that didn't fade with applause. It lingered, heavy with understanding. Everyone could see it. Everyone could feel it. And Big Tony, for the first time, saw the reflection of his own behavior clearly in front of him. Dean Martin had turned the tables, and he had done it without losing himself. After the show, Dean Martin returned backstage. The applause was fading, the audience dispersing, but the tension from the confrontation still lingered in the air. His manager was pacing, nervously glancing at the door. Then came a knock. One of Big Tony's associates appeared, calm, controlled. "Mr. Martin," he said, "Big Tony wants to speak with you. He's waiting outside." Dean nodded, composed. "I'll talk to him," he said. There was no hesitation, no fear, just measured confidence. Outside, under the muted lights of the parking lot, Big Tony leaned against a Cadillac, cigarette smoke curling into the night. His crew lingered behind, keeping their distance. Tony's eyes narrowed as he studied Dean. There was something about Dean's calm that unsettled him. The man had not reacted with anger. He had not begged for peace. He had not flinched. He had simply spoken the truth, and it had landed. "You made me look like an idiot in there," Tony said finally. His voice was low, controlled, but there was no anger. Just acknowledgement. Dean didn't flinch. "I made yourself look small," he said evenly. "I simply pointed it out." Tony laughed, bitter and short. "I could make life very diff. I cult for you here, you know that, don't you?" Dean remained calm. "You could probably end my career in Vegas. You have that power. And yet, here I am. That's your choice. That's not mine." The silence stretched. Tony exhaled slowly. The tension of the showroom had followed them outside. But outside, Dean's quiet confidence dominated. No words were wasted. No gestures were aggressive. Every movement intentional. "Why risk it?" Tony asked finally. "Why defend your mother's honor like that? Most men wouldn't." Dean's voice softened, measured. "Some things are more important than a career, more important than money, more important than staying safe. My mother gave me everything she could. The least I can do is defend her memory when it's disrespected." Tony was quiet. A long pause. The cigarette in his hand burned down to ash. Then he said quietly, "She was a good woman, better than I turned out to be. What you said in there, about power, about treating people, it made me think, maybe I've forgotten some of the lessons I once knew." Dean nodded, calm. "It's never too late to remember." Tony flicked the cigarette away. "You're the real deal, Dean. You stood there and spoke truth without attacking me, without humiliating me. That takes more guts than pulling a gun." Dean smiled faintly. "It's who I am." "No," Tony corrected. "It's who your mother raised you to be, and she did a hell of a job." The two men shook hands. Agreement wasn't about friendship. It was acknowledgement, respect, understanding. A dangerous man had come looking to assert power, and a singer had responded with calm authority. No threat, no fight, just truth. As Tony and his crew departed, Dean returned inside. His manager rushed over. "What happened? Are you okay? Did he threaten you?" Dean shook his head. He apologized. That's all, no more trouble. It was more than safety, it was a lesso. The night had proven that courage and calm could achieve what intimidation never could. Years later, long after that November night, the story of Dean Martin and Big Tony became a quiet legend in Las Vegas, not because of violence, not because of threats, not because of a public showdown, but because of the way a man responded with calm, measured strength. Dean never sought credit. He never told reporters the full story. Yet entertainers, performers, and those who worked the strip knew the tale. They whispered it backstage, in dressing rooms, and in quiet corners of casino floors. The story wasn't about humiliation. It was about principle, about courage, about holding firm to what mattered even when the stakes were life-altering. In interviews years later, people asked Dean why he had responded the way he did, why he didn't lash out, why he didn't back down. Dean would pause, thinking carefully, then speak softly, almost reverently. Most people would have reacted with anger, he said. They would have returned cruelty with cruelty. But my mother taught me something different. She taught me that true strength is how you behave when you don't have to. She taught me to see what drives others to hurt, to see their weakness, not their threat. It wasn't just words, it was a philosophy, and it had been demonstrated in front of hundreds that night. Dean's calm had spoken louder than any threat ever could. In 1965, he reflected on the incident in private interviews. The insult wasn't about me, he said. It was about him trying to show his power. The lesson my mother taught me allowed me to address the root of it without giving in to the instinct to fight, and that changed the room. It changed him. Maybe not completely, but enough to make him pause, to reflect. That's all we can ever do. Remind people of what they once knew. Dean Martin carried the memory of his mother everywhere. In 1995, after his passing, his daughter found a small box among his possessions. Inside was a photograph of Angela Martin and a note she had written for Dean when he was a boy. In simple, careful handwriting, she reminded him, "Being strong doesn't mean being cruel. Being powerful doesn't mean being harsh. True strength is showing kindness when it's easiest to be unkind. True power is lifting people, not tearing them down." That night with Big Tony was the living embodiment of that lesson. It wasn't just a moment of confrontation. It was a demonstration of life's deeper truths, of what character and dignity mean, of the quiet courage it takes to hold to principle when everyone expects you to bend. Big Tony himself changed, subtly. Friends who knew him later said he softened. He never became virtuous, but he carried a flicker of respect for those who acted with integrity. And it all traced back to one night in 1955 when a mobster tried to assert dominance and a man on a stage responded with calm, unwavering truth. Dean Martin's life, his career, and the respect he earned weren't built on bravado or threats. They were built on understanding what really mattered. Respect, character, and defending what is sacred without resorting to cruelty. That night became more than legend. It became a lesson for everyone who heard it. Courage isn't loud. Strength isn't aggressive. Power isn't feared, and defending the ones you love doesn't require violence. It requires only clarity, principle, and courage. And that is why, decades later, people still tell the story of Dean Martin and the mob boss. Not because of the insult, not because of the fear, but because a calm, steadfast man showed the world exactly what real strength looks like, and reminded us all that dignity and kindness can conquer even the darkest, most dangerous moments.